She put a hand on his cheek, and suddenly none of it mattered. "I don't care if you ask or not," he said, pulling her into his arms again. At least she let him hold her. That would have to do until they wed. "We can work it all out on our wedding night." He was determined to bring his beloved Poppy the same pleasure that he would find in her body. He'd read all about it in a French book, stumbling along through the strange words, and he was astute enough to realize that none of the semi-professional encounters with women he'd had before coming to Paris had had anything to do with his partner's pleasure. In fact, thinking of their practiced moans made him shudder. If Paris had taught him anything, it was this. He could sleep with Cleopatra herself, and if she wasn't enjoying the act, he didn't want anything to do with it. When a Parisian woman smiled, her smile was an invitation that had everything to do with her pleasure and little to do with his. When a Parisian woman smiled at him, Fletcher remembered Cecile, who told him that his lips were as beautiful as cherries, or Elise, who uttered little screams when she saw him unclothed. Of course, Elise and Cecile belonged to his first month in Paris, before he fell in love. Now his heart was full of Poppy, and his loins would love to follow his heart. But Poppy, leaning against his broad shoulder, frowned to herself. What exactly did Fletch mean by saying that they would work it out? That sounded as if this type of kissing was something he had his heart set upon. Poppy was a practical little soul at the heart. She could see that her husband's easygoing manners and sweet eyes masked a sturdy determination to get his own way. One only had to look at his wind-swept locks to see that. Never a touch of powder. Her mother clucked, but Fletch refused, and Poppy had to admit that he looked well with raven locks tumbling around his neck. "I'll ask Gemma," she promised. He was kissing her ear, and she liked that. In fact, she enjoyed many of the things Fletch did, like putting his arms around her, as long as he didn't disturb her hair, and kissing her ear and her cheek and her chin, and even her lips, except when he became a trifle too forceful in that respect. Her mother had instructed her very firmly on that front. "You must allow him to brush your lips with his," she had said. "After all, he is a duke. You will be a duchess. In order to catch a duke, one must allow certain indignities." At the time, Poppy had laughed at the idea that Fletcher's lips on hers could be seen as an indignity. Joy had flooded her soul that she was so lucky. She was in love with a duke, and that made her mother happy. A duke, darling Fletch, was in love with her, and that made her happy. In fact, the world was all sunshine and light if she could just work out this kissing business. "Let me show you how nice it is," Fletch said coaxingly. When his voice deepened like that, Poppy wanted to do anything he wished, though of course she would never have told him so. One mustn't let men know how much power they have, her mother often said, and she was right, of course. But she obediently bent her head up towards his, and he brushed his lips across hers. "That's nice," she said encouragingly. "Why, The next moment, he pulled her so sharply into his arms that she felt her stays poke directly into her breasts. Her brooch unhooked and fell to the stone floor. "Fletch!" she cried. He took advantage of that and stuck his tongue directly into her mouth. Directly! And swept it about, as if she was some sort of cupboard he were cleaning. Oh, no! She shrieked, shoving him away. For a small woman, Poppy had a lot of strength. "But Poppy!" Not even his sad eyes could make her change her mind about this. "I love you, Fletch. You know that." She narrowed her eyes and waited. "You know how much I love you," he said, giving her a coaxing little smile. She didn't smile back. "You simply have to learn that there are things that an English lady doesn't do." "What do you mean?" He looked a bit confused, and Poppy had a flash of pride. For once, she knew something he didn't. "Mama?"